Hi, everybody. It's Jason from Murideo, and on today's episode, I have the man himself, Dave Abrams from Avical. Dave, how's it going?
I'm good, Jason. How are you?
I'm fantastic, man. It's so good to see you, so good to hear from you. I know you're super busy, and that sort of ties into some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. And as I sort of said in the description of today's episode, I said, we talk all the time about the technicals around calibration, but like, how do you actually run it as a business and make money? So, you were one of the first people I thought of. I was like, Dave's been doing it forever. He's successful. So let's help some of these newer calibrators figure out how to actually do this without, being in the hole, if you will.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the conversation kind of started with us over the past few months. You and I have been talking about the business of calibration as it picks up in Florida and it picks up, of course, out
Yeah.
here again.
Sure,
And we just
sure.
started saying, this just makes a good podcast. Let's do a
Yeah.
podcast on it.
Yeah, it's good talking points too, right? Like, I calibrate nights and weekends whenever I can, and there's just a lot of things that you have to do to kind of get to that point where you're doing it in a legit fashion, and whether that's starting an LLC or that's part of it, or buying your gear, insuring your gear, and scheduling and all that stuff. I mean, it's fun to go out and calibrate TVs and really nice home theater systems, but like at the end of the day, you gotta make money, you gotta survive, you gotta put food on the table. So I agreeing with you, I thought this would be a really cool topic to talk about. Before we get too deep into it, just letting everybody know there is a question box. Feel free if you have any questions throughout. Dave and I will answer those on the fly as best as we can. And of course, there'll be some time at the end for some questions there too. So thank you everybody for coming and hanging out. I do see some familiar names here on the attendee list. So thank you guys for your continued support. Dave, I thought what would be a good place to kind of start, because we want to get other folks kind of on their own journey, but I thought I think it'd be cool to talk about your journey and how you've gotten to the place you've gotten, and then we'll kind of just go from there.
Sure, sure. So, like many people, I was always interested in audio video. And when I was growing up, it was reading things like Stereophile's Guide to Home Theater and the various other publications that were out. Widescreen Review was a big one. And in high school, I was reading those magazines and reading reviews and thinking, well, what do I want to do with my career? And I had found audio video extremely fascinating. I really enjoyed it. And as I learned and read more about display calibration and how everything really should look the same, this color jacket is one specific jacket. My paleness is one very specific shade of paleness that's
Yeah,
out there. And I don't want a TV to make me look too red, or
right.
oversaturated. And as
Mhm.
I started learning about that and trying to apply that to what I was learning in high school, I reached out to the ISF and talked with Joel Silver a bit, and he said to me, he goes, there's two ways you can really get started in this business. And keep in mind, this was back in the 90s, right,
Yeah,
1999.
right.
So he said there's really two ways you can get started in this business. One, you can go to school for electrical engineering and learn how to build the product.
Mhm.
Or two, you could go to school for video production and you can learn how to create the product.
Mhm.
And so I um, took the path of going to Ithaca College for video production. That's where my formal education is. And when I was there, I took a lot of time to really learn about like back focusing cameras. How does the camera capture a light? How to use the
Mhm.
waveform monitors and vector scopes, which we were learning about in school, and applying that to then video calibration in home theater. And hey, I know how to make the product now. I know how we're capturing. I know how we're editing it. I know how we're mastering it. Can we now know how to reproduce it accurately
Mhm.
for the home? And so I had graduated high school, and in 2000, I took the ISF class. It was over at CNET with Joel Silver, Jim Burns, Jim Doolittle, and Kevin Miller was supporting that. He was at the time he was working at CNET as a reviewer. He was one of the famous reviewers out there, and took the class. And then I was extremely fortunate that following up with Jim Doolittle, he allowed me to come out to Boston and sit in on some jobs. Which today, when you talk about the business of calibration, that's unheard of, right? Because
Yeah.
essentially, I'm going to be his competitor, right? I'm coming to him and saying, hey, thanks for doing this ISF class. Can I come out and carry your gear? Can I come out and set up your stuff and just like shadow you and learn as much as I possibly can?
Sure, sure.
And he was very kind to let me do that and carry his gear. And carry his gear I did, but I learned a ton from there. And after a couple years, I was at a point with my college career where I could intern. and I
Mm.
interned with Joe Kane Productions out in Los Angeles here,
Oh, very
which kind
cool.
of is what brought me to Los Angeles. I interned with Joe Kane. Joe taught me so many great things, opened a lot of doors for me, and ultimately, when I graduated college, I moved out to LA, got away from the cold weather of New York, and started
Yeah, yeah.
working out here. And then the business just it snowballs, right? You do a calibration, you do good work. I mean, you've been there, I've been there.
Hmm.
You start really slow and you build that up, and maybe that's a good segue for us to get into sort of running a calibration business.
Right,
So,
right.
how did you get started? How did you get started with your
Yeah.
endeavor into display
Um,
calibration?
my story is similar to yours in a lot of ways. I grew up with a 1980s and 1990s camcorder in my face as a child, and I'd always been interested in cameras and taking pictures and a little bit of photography myself. I thought for sure that I would end up in some sort of broadcast, like news broadcast career, after high school and college and whatnot. And the reason I say that is because we had at my high school, it was brand new, and we had this like state of the art TV production studio. And I'm around the same age as you. I mean, I graduated high school in like 2000, so we're close. And at the time, I'm sitting there learning how cameras work and how monitors work and editing and all the stuff like you mentioned. And something just clicked one day. We were learning how to white balance the cameras, and I'm like, wait a second. So for white balancing the cameras, shouldn't we also white balance the monitor too? And it all started to kind of click from there. And like you, I just want my movies to look right and to sound right. It doesn't seem like it's asking for much, but it always kind of goes back to that whole idea of artistic intent. And I like telling the story because it's fun and it's silly. But as a little kid, my grandparents had a console TV, black and white, with a record player on top, if
Mhm.
anybody's old enough to remember those things. But it had a contrast and a brightness knob, and I think a phase knob, and some maybe one or two others, because it wasn't anything fancy at the time. But I remember taking specifically taking the black level knob and turning it down until I couldn't see any shadows, and then turning it back up just a little bit until I could see the shadows again. So this stuff has always kind of been in my blood. My great grandpa he had a TV and radio repair shop after he retired. He did that for about 25 years. So I was in his office and stuff, helping him fix TVs and stuff as a little kid. So it kind of comes from just being in my family and being in my blood, but also just the love of the art of film and music and stuff like that. So I started off, I was at the time working for a big box retailer. They started offering calibration. It was right up my alley. I went to the ISF course like you, 2007 or so. And it's just since then, it's been off to the races. And I just feel very lucky, man. We get to see, systems that I could never afford. I don't know about you, but and we get to go into theaters that are just really, really fun to play in. So I, like you, kind of turned my hobby into a job. But with that comes, I've got to make money,
Mhm.
and there's just so much more to it, right? Like when I was at the big box store, they took care of the health insurance, they took care of a 401k,
Mhm.
they provided the vehicle, they provided a credit card for gas, and it was like I just got to go do the work, which was great. Like all the administrative
Mhm.
stuff and back end stuff was taken care of for me. But then when you transition into doing it for yourself, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people get into this. At least the calibrators I know, and I think a lot of the calibrators you either get into you get into the career because you're interested in AV. It's fascinating. You're learning about it. You're an enthusiast that sort of migrates from enthusiast into professional,
Hmm.
or you have a need, right? So if you look at the studios out here in LA, some of the people performing their calibrations, they're not necessarily the enthusiasts. It's that, well, they're creating content and they have questions, right? They have a
Sure.
market need of, okay, these four monitors look different. I need them to be the same, or at least I need to know which one is right when I make my artistic
Right.
decision. And then they're getting it. So you kind of have those two different ways to get into it. But if you're talking about an employee at a studio, you're talking more like you were at Best Buy, right? Someone else is handling all the administrative work. Someone else
Yeah.
is handling the budgeting and the purchasing the equipment and
Right.
whatnot. But for us enthusiasts or professionals, and I say that because I see there's two levels of calibrators out there when we talk about the business of calibration. We've got
Hmm.
the enthusiast hobbyist that's doing it for maybe a side hustle, some
Yeah.
extra
Sure.
money, doing it because they're fascinated in it. They do it nights and weekends for friends.
Hmm.
Um, Not really running a professional calibration business because they're not having to maybe supply their own 401k because they have the
Right.
day job.
They
They're
have a
not
day
having to
job.
worry about health insurance because they have
Right.
the day job, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so not to say they're not a great calibrator. I don't want to belittle someone who's doing it on the side who actually might be a great calibrator, but just to say it's not being run as a profitable enterprise in terms of, can we scale this? Can we grow this? Can we make this into something else?
Sure.
And then there's like yourself and myself, maybe not so much you, because I know you have a day job still, but myself, exactly, like the Murideo there.
Yeah.
But myself, my sole career is calibration. So I have to worry about, like, what am I going to do about retirement? What am I going to do about health insurance? What am I going to do about buying the best equipment so I can get the best jobs? And so for many years, I ran my business very, very poorly. And I didn't know enough because I heeded Joel Silver's advice. I went to school for video production or electrical engineering. I didn't get an MBA. I didn't go to school for running a business. And then I tried to become a business owner, and I thought, maybe I should have gotten an MBA. You know, that probably would have helped me out, actually, because now I'm dealing with all this administrative stuff. But School of Hard Knocks, you slowly learn, you slowly get there. And so things, as we've been talking about, it's how do you price yourself, right? And what kind of tools do you buy? And how are you going to position yourself in the market? There's so many ways a calibrator can position themselves, but if you're trying to do it professionally, you have to be charging enough where you can think about the future, where you can invest in the equipment. We have the CR 300 and CR 100 meters, right? And I know you use a Jetty, not cheap equipment to use, right? And so how much do you have to charge as a calibrator to then be able to invest in those tools to then provide those services?
Right.
And that's kind of, I think, where you and I have gone with it. We can start with maybe just, I know I'm an S Corp. I think you were starting in an LLC and shielding yourself from some liability, right? If you're in someone's home, if you're on someone's property, if someone sues you, you drop a TV or you break a $200,000 projector, you know, make sure you have insurance, make sure you're properly taken care of so someone can't come after you. Highly recommend that. My attorneys have always said that. We set that up a long time ago. When you start working for professionals like studios and businesses, they require workers' comp insurance. You have to have workers' comp insurance. A lot of the studios out here in Los Angeles won't even let you on property if you aren't properly insured. You'll need an umbrella policy. You'll need your workers' comp. You'll need, I mean, heck, today, a lot of studios, you know, they want your vaccine status. You know, they won't even let you on property without vaccine status. So, whereas, you know, going to someone's home, I don't think I've ever had someone in their home say, hey, can I get a certificate of liability on your workers' comp? Never. No, never. It's not even a thought. But having those things add up, right? The cost of doing business. So then you have to say to yourself, okay, so I have to be an S Corp or an LLC or some kind of corporation to have some kind of limited liability should, you know, God forbid, something go horribly wrong. And then I have to have a certain amount of insurance. Well, that comes with a cost. And then you're driving to and from a lot of these jobs. Maybe, you know, when you were at Best Buy, you probably got a mileage reimbursement or they gave you a car.
They gave us a car.
They gave you a car. So they didn't have to reimburse your mileage, but I think mileage reimbursements today are about 58 cents a mile. If you drive 100 miles round trip, that's, what is that, $58? $58. You know, just for the round trip, on top of the employee cost of the time driving to and from that job, and then on top of the thing. So we look at trying to figure out how does that all fit together very well. And in the beginning, I'll tell you, I was running at a loss for many years. I mean, I was making money, right? But I wasn't making more money than I could make working for someone else. I was making less money than I could make working for someone else, but I worked for myself. And there's something to be said about working for yourself.
There's something I see a lot of time with new calibrators, and they get really starry-eyed when they realize, you know, that, you know, they're going to be able to charge $200 to $800, you know, maybe per day, even if they've got a lot of jobs lined up. And it's like, that sounds like a great living, and that sounds like really, really good money. But when you start factoring in those other things, like you said, you know, the profit just, you know, it starts getting squished and squished and squished and squished. And the next thing you know, I think we were talking about this the other day, but next thing you know, you might be making, at the end of the day, you might be making 15, 20 bucks an hour. And to your point, you could do that. You can make even more than that with doing that type of work for a lot of integrators. So yeah, it's finding this balance between, you know, making money and still having fun and not driving yourself crazy and not having this super stressful life. And I get it. You know, there's times where, again, because I do it mostly nights and weekends, but you know, there's times where somebody will contact me and they'll say, hey, you know, we just bought this new projector or new TV or whatever, or dealer will hit me up and say, hey, we just put it in the system and it's in Miami. And I'm like, okay, well, it sounds fun. I really want to do the job. I really want to see the system and play with it. But, you know, it's 4 hours there. Depending on how long it's going to take and what time I'm starting, I might need to get a hotel. I'm going to have to drive 4 hours back the next day. I have to eat while I'm there, you know, all that mileage, like what you talked about, and gas and all those other things. So, you know, you're thinking like, oh, great, I'm going to make 800 bucks on this job. And then, you know, meanwhile, it's like, not really, not really at all. So yeah, I totally get what you're saying.
Exactly. You start chiseling away, right? The mileage,
Hmm.
the per diem for your daily food, and then your hotel, the cost of doing business, your insurance, maybe putting into a retirement plan, and all of a sudden it starts ballooning. And I know one of the things you and I have talked about is how much calibration pricing doesn't seem to have increased a lot over the
Not a
last
lot.
20 years. A little bit,
Not a
but
man.
the complexity has gone way up, right? When I started and you started, it was like CRT TVs and plasmas, and you weren't calibrating for 20 different modes, right? You were calibrating for, let's say, Rec 709 on a Pioneer plasma. Maybe you did a
Right.
day mode and a night mode, which was an offset of the other. And so
Yeah.
you could get in and get out fairly quick. Today, we're calibrating for SDR. Let's say Rec 709, we're calibrating for HDR. We're calibrating for Dolby Vision.
Hmm.
And then we're adding complexity to the tools today. We have all this software on the market that allows us to do things like 1D lookup tables, 3D lookup tables, image processors that you could put in front of a TV to do lookup tables that we didn't necessarily have,
Yeah.
15, 20 years ago. They're
Hmm.
certainly not as easily available or as readily available with that technology as we do today. And so now the time investment per calibration has gone up,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the cost hasn't necessarily followed with that. And the cost of doing business has gone up. I think, at least for me, insurance has gone up. Now gas is at an all-time high, it looks. And so that's something, we all have to think about as running a business.
Yeah.
And so all those things start to come in. I'd argue that calibration prices need to go up. And I'm not just here trying to
Yeah.
like tell everybody, hey, let's all raise the rates, right?
Spend
Like,
more
hey, it's
money.
good for me.
Yeah.
But
Well,
uh, but if you just look at it that way, you start to think to yourself, wow, all this stuff is increased. And if you're doing it as a professional calibrator and that's all you do, you
hmm
really need to think about the balance of what you're pulling home at the end of the day and
yeah.
how much per hour does that actually work out to. But if you're
hmm
doing it like a Best Buy or some other, or any CD integrator, if they're adding calibration to their service, or any reseller really, well, now they're amortizing it against other business lines.
Yeah.
So maybe they can stay more competitive than the individual calibrator. But
hmm
often I'd argue a lot of those calibrators aren't as specialized or highly skilled is
Yeah.
some of the guys like you and I that might be doing it daily every day in and out, and,
Right.
and really focusing our skill set.
Just to give you kind of some perspective, when I started doing the work in '07, working for that big box retailer, a calibration for a day and a night mode, and to your point, no HDR or anything back in those days, of course. So we were doing SDR Rec 709 day mode, night mode, and it was 300 bucks, and that was in 2007.
$100.
So, we're most calibrators that I talk to that are just going to work on, say, a flat panel,
Mm-hmm.
even to this day, all those years later, they're sometimes not that much more than that $300. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I kind of agree with you. But here's the double-edged sword, though, is a Pioneer plasma back then was $7,000. So 300
That's
bucks was
right.
like no big deal. But now we're getting 77-inch OLEDs for $2,800, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I can't charge. I probably can't charge too much more. But you mentioned it before, and you hit the nail on the head. I had a private client recently. He worked for Microsoft. He worked on the Xbox team. So he was like all the game modes, it was SDR day, SDR night, SDR game, HDR game, Dolby Vision game. That was 7 modes. And I was at the guy's house for 5.5 hours. That's not 300 bucks. I'm sorry. You
No,
know? Yeah.
no. And then it starts to go on with the game modes there and whatnot you're talking about. So now I find more and more calibrators I'm personally talking to, we're talking about how accurate is accurate enough.
Hmm.
Because when it was a Pioneer plasma, you had only so many adjustments, let's say 20,
Yeah.
30, 40 adjustments.
Yeah.
And you could really measure them all, quantify them all, and adjust them all fairly quickly. It didn't take that much longer. Now, if you're, let's say you're building a LUT for game mode and you're building a LUT for cinema mode, and let's say you're unable to copy the LUT from memory to memory, you
Yeah.
start to say to yourself, okay, so an hour here, an hour there, an hour here, an hour there. Well, can I do a faster process, maybe with a little less accuracy
Hmm.
overall, but it gets me in and out faster to keep
Right.
this at a reasonable price point? And so that has become an ongoing thing that I've had a conversation with many, many people that you and I
Yeah.
both know in the industry of how accurate enough. Where is somebody going to appreciate what we've done and see the benefit, but not so little that
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
really not doing my job.
in your specific position that you're in, it's kind of unique because I know you still do some regular, I'll call them, residential calibrations here and there, but like for me, I'm doing mostly residential. Occasionally I'll get a video wall in a bank or something, but to your point, in your position for what you're doing with the studios, I mean, you have to run huge LUTs and you have to do all this and that. But when I'm looking at a TV in a sunroom here in Florida, like, do I need to run a 9x9 fixed grid 750 point LUT? Probably not. I can probably do a 100-point LUT or maybe even a 50-point LUT and still get excellent results, especially the way the TVs these days, man. I'm telling you, man. And I know you can agree with me on this one, but if you showed me the numbers of an average priced OLED today and showed me the after reports, if
Mhm.
even just a few years ago, I would have said, "Oh, great, you worked on a professional broadcast monitor. That's $40,000. Good job. That must have been fun." And it's like, no, this is a $1,700 TV I can buy anywhere I want to. So yeah, it's gotten harder because of all the different modes and stuff, but it's also gotten easier because the software and the tools and
Mhm.
all the other things. And that kind of actually brings up another point I had written down here. Let's talk a little bit about the tools. I mean, I did not start off with a Jetty and a Klein and a Murideo. I know you did not start off with I think you're still using the Murideo 6G, I believe. But either way, you didn't start off with that and the colorimetry research pieces.
Mhm.
So what I tell a lot of the new guys is, you might have this end goal for your gear, but like you don't have to start. When I tell people I'm coming into their house with $27,000 worth of equipment, their jaw drops, right? But
Mhm.
that's because we are who we are. You don't have to start that way. I started off with an i1 Pro 2 and the C6, and I used that kit for years before I started doing my major upgrades. What did you start with? I know you probably had I had some old Sencor stuff back in the day, but you were telling me
Sure.
about you were optical comparators and all kinds of stuff, weren't you?
I had a product called the TVS Pro optical comparator. And if you were calibrating, I think before 2004, 2005, you knew what that was.
Yeah, right.
It had a black and white color temp at about 5,400 Kelvin. It had a D65 color temp at about 6,500 Kelvin. It was LED modulated
Hmm.
and little metal box. I have it here actually in the office somewhere.
Yeah.
And what you would do is you'd hold it up and you'd compare, with your eye to
Yeah,
the
you're
white on the
looking.
screen, and it was really great. And that was the first tool I had, maybe for the first dozen or 2 dozen calibrations. And then I
Hmm.
purchased a Sencor CP290, a suction cup
Yep.
with a little handheld,
Hmm.
readout, and I was using that. And of course, I think similar to you, most of my early reports were all done on paper. You had the
Yeah.
ISF yellow, pink, and white slip paper, and you would write everything down. You'd write down the
Hmm.
settings, you document the color temp, you'd go
Sure.
through 10 steps. But most of those displays, again, only had 2 point adjustments. So you do two
Right.
points, you try to make it average out, and then you'd write it all down, and you'd give them their receipt and their handwritten report. Today, as we've migrated, I'm now at a spectroradiometer with a
Hmm.
colorimeter because I like the accuracy plus the speed that I get,
Yep.
right? So you can't really, it's hard to do LUTs with just a spectroradiometer because it's really slow
Yeah. Right.
and it's not quite as sensitive near low light unless you're getting into like really heavy duty lab grade equipment. And the generator, I think in the beginning, my very first generator was an AccuPel. I
Oh
don't think
gosh.
they're still
Yeah.
around. I think
Yeah.
they're gone now.
I haven't heard that
But it
name in
was an
forever.
AccuPel. and he was excellent. And now I have a variety of generators based on what I need. If I'm doing serial digital, if I'm doing HDMI,
Yeah.
if I'm doing different software programs, work with different generators. So you might need a
Hmm.
software program that specifically works with a specific generator. Um, but I would argue, I would argue it might be good to bring back an optical comparator for matching, for
For
perceptual
perceptual
matching,
matching. Yeah,
for perceptual matching.
that's not a crazy
I
thought
would,
at all. I'm with you.
I yeah, I would argue that the days of the optical comparator might be coming back. If you could calibrate an optical comparator to, say, a mastering monitor, and then walk around with that and compare other display
Yeah.
technologies to that mastering monitor,
Yeah.
I think that could have a purpose. It could
Yeah.
have a
Yeah.
purpose.
So
Um,
you've kept a lot of your old gear, and we were just talking about this before we started today, but I've kept all my old gear, and not just for like nostalgia purposes necessarily, but I had a guy reach out to me a few years ago, and he had this, I think it was a Panasonic projector, and he loved it to death. He had no interest in upgrading, but he had gotten a new bulb and just wanted to do some basic adjustments to it. So
mhm.
it's component video only. So I had to take my Sencor, my 401, and I'm like, thank goodness I held on to this thing. So yeah, I'm with
Yeah.
you. The trip down memory lane with the gear is always fun, and I think, I mean, I was probably 5 years in before I bought my Klein first because I wanted to go really fast, but
Mhm.
I was profiling that with my i1 Pro 2, and then after about a year of having the Klein, I just kept getting call after call after call for the laser based, the laser phosphor Sonys and
Mhm.
JVCs and stuff. And I had this one particular client who was like, look, I want to hire you, but you need a better spectroradiometer. The i1 Pro 2 just won't cut it for a JVC or a Sony projector. So I was like, you know what? If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it now. And that's when I bought the Jetty. And honestly, man, here's the other thing I think that's interesting. When you get to that level of Jetty and Klein and colorimetry research, Minolta and photo research and all these, what we always refer to as the high-end meters, I don't see myself needing to upgrade probably ever. I mean, that Jetty is 150,000 nits. It's like I might
Mhm.
be at the end of my road for now, at least. I don't know if you feel like
Mhm.
that too, but
Well, yeah. So the great thing and the bad thing, right? Great and bad. The great
yeah,
thing is these light measurement instrumentation doesn't change that fast. That's the great thing
yeah,
about it. Because the
right.
bad thing is you spend a lot of money on it. So
Yeah, yeah,
if I was
yeah.
spending $20,000 a year on light meters, because every year they came out with a new light meter, my
That'd be
business would I would
terrible.
have to charge a lot more money, right?
Yeah.
But we don't see the advancements in that technology as quick as we'd like, at least in our industry, right?
Yeah.
So photo research, I think the PR 650 went a decade before the 655
Yeah.
came out to
Yeah.
replace it, and then the 655 went for a very long time, and
Hmm.
the CR100 colorimeter and the Klein that you're using, the Klein, I'm using CR100, both considered top performers, but both of those have been on the market a very long time,
Yeah. Yeah.
and and that's a great thing, because as someone who's going to have to amortize that as part of your business and how you're
Hmm.
justifying the cost of it, hey, if I can amortize this over 5 or 10 or 15 years, well, that's going to be better. I don't think you'll maybe get 15 years out of it, and I don't think I'll get
Yeah.
15 years out of mine, because it seems about in every 8 to 10 years we see some kind
Yeah.
of change in light measurement, is how I feel.
Hmm.
So, but still, 8 to 10 years is very good. I can tell you the studios, when they're buying products, because we'll consult a little bit on what products we recommend in the studios, like displays, projectors, all that kind of stuff. They always have a 5-year amortization schedule. So they'll
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
this needs to be the right product for the next 5 years of our pipeline,
Hmm. Hmm.
when they're doing that. So I kind of like to look at it like that with my stuff. Can I buy this meter and can I have it for the next 5 years? Will it handle my
Hmm.
needs? And
Yeah.
if it'll handle your needs, then it's probably a good way to go.
You jogged my memory a moment ago about one cost that I don't think we've mentioned yet is I have to send my Jetty in to Germany once a year, and it's March. I got to send mine to March,
Yeah.
and it's an expensive tool, and it's a great tool, but I have yearly maintenance on it, just like with certain software programs. So it's
Mhm.
not just buy it once and that's it. You have to calculate all that stuff into all the other things
Mhm.
we talked about, insurance
That's right.
and a car and all that other stuff. Um, I wanted to ask you about this because this is something I've kind of tossed around for a while. Um, I've always been like, to a certain extent, like very paranoid about leaving my gear in the car. Maybe it gets stolen.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm on site and I drop the thing. that's even if you have something like an i1 Pro 2 or a
Mm-hmm.
C6, that's still, you know, a grand or a couple grand or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
are you in any way, shape, or form insuring your gear?
Yes, yes, I do insure my equipment. I think it's a smart thing to do when you do have, you know, $27,000 of equipment, or even
Yeah,
5, 10 grand. I mean, it's
doesn't
all
matter. Yeah,
proportional, right, to the person. Some
sure.
people, $5,000 might not be a lot. Some people that might be a ton. But I would
Ton.
recommend insuring it for those instances. I do not leave my gear in the car.
Right. Yeah,
I mean, if I get lunch, like if I'm in between jobs, I'll leave it in the car. I try to keep an
that's what
eye
I
on the
was.
car, but I don't
Yeah.
like park it overnight on the street and leave
No.
my equipment in the car.
Yeah, no way.
And I also don't leave it visible in the car. So it
Yeah.
goes in the trunk. I don't put it in the
Hmm.
back seat where someone could see it.
Right,
I
right.
did have a TSA agent drop my CR300 once. They pulled it out of the Pelican case
Oh
years ago,
my
dropped it, put
goodness.
a nice dent in the little back of
Ugh.
it, and I was so
Your
upset about it. And I
your
was
heart
able to
had to have
have my
just.
spare. I have more than one, so I was able to have another one sent to
Yeah,
me. Thank goodness. At the
yeah.
time, I was able to have another one sent to me for the job, and I sent that one back to Commentary Research, who happens to be based out of here in the Los Angeles area, and nothing was wrong with it. You know, I paid them to like recalibrate it, check it, and they're like,
Yeah.
it's just cosmetic. It's just a little dent in the casing. And but I was like, and it was
That's
on the
still.
way to the calibration. You know, it was on the way to the calibration.
Oh
So I'm like, can you
man.
overnight a meter to the hotel? And can I get a replay? And I'll send the other one back. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was not fun.
What oh, before I forget, because you'll think this is funny, and I'll move on to the next question, but I'm paranoid enough about it that I rented a storage locker, like a storage unit.
Hmm.
It's not a ton. It's a real small storage unit. It's like a 5 feet by 5 feet. And I keep a few things in there that I just can't fit in closets at home, like giant speaker boxes in case I move and need to box the speakers up again. But the main reason for getting the storage unit for me was to put my gear in there. Because if my house got broken into and somebody runs off with that case, that's a big problem. So I even keep my gear in a storage unit just for the peace of mind of
Oh
it's,
wow.
somebody's not going to break into my house and steal it. What kind of insurance is that? I mean, I don't know if that would fall into your homeowner's
Ooh.
insurance or what does that, do
No,
you
no,
know?
no. So Avical has their own insurance policy that we have like an umbrella policy on driving as well.
Oh, okay.
A lot of the commercial clients that we go to, let's say you're parked in their garage and there's an
Mm-hmm.
earthquake and the parking garage comes down and crushes your car. They
Mm-hmm.
want you to have an umbrella policy that covers your car first. And then
Right.
if you don't have enough insurance, then you come after them. It's weird how it all works. And
Yeah.
but I honestly don't know the exact. I have cyber insurance for our, client list, which I have to have because some of the
Oh,
client lists are very sensitive.
that's a whole nother
Um,
thing. That's a whole nother
that's a
thing.
whole other thing.
Right.
We have liability insurance. Should we
Mm-hmm.
break something? Should we damage something? We have workers' comp insurance. Should we get injured? Most of those commercial clients, when you have vendor contracts, they'll say to you, again, if you trip over a wire, let's say on the set of something, and you break your leg, that's a
Mm-hmm.
claim on your personal insurance first, which you'd be like, wait, it's
Yeah,
like
that's
you hit me, right?
yeah.
I was on your set, you had a wire, I tripped, how is that on me?
Right.
And I've talked to insurance people, they're like, no, they can do that. They can do that. They basically put it in a contract and say, you're first, we're second, we're the backup
Wow.
insurance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's things like to incentivize people to not make a false claim, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's things that kind of go around that as it's been explained to me. But we just have a huge package that kind of comes into play, and it's thousands of dollars a year. It's thousands of
Oh,
dollars a year, especially
I'm
when you add
sure.
workers' comp into it. It's thousands of dollars a year that we end up paying.
Right.
But then I have to say to myself, am I charging high enough prices
Mm-hmm.
to then make sure I'm covering that, paying myself a reasonable rate, putting into, I have a SEP IRA, am I putting into my IRA? Am I paying into my health insurance,
Right.
plan that I have to cover essentially for myself because I don't have a company giving me health insurance, and all that stuff kind of adds up. And then, as we talked about, the 4 hour drive to Miami, right? And
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
mileage and the gas and the wear and tear and all of that stuff that has to kind of again come into to play.
The one thing we haven't mentioned yet is the unproductive time, like the non-wrench time. So driving's part of that, right? But like I know Kevin Miller specifically, either one day a week, either Monday or Tuesday or something, he'll take an entire day just to
Hmm.
do like more back end administrative type stuff. So, you're again, you're working an entire day, not making any income. So if you're calculating all your calibrations the other 5 days a week, well, you've also got to calculate that sixth day of the week where
That's
you're
right.
not bringing in any income. But of course, you're contacting customers and you're generating jobs and you're going to get that income later. But I talk to customers sometimes myself, and again, your position is slightly different than mine, but you'll feel me on this. Somebody will email me and say, "Hey, I'm going to buy a TV. I'm planning on buying a TV in August. Do you think you'll be able to come do it?" And I'm like, "It's only March, but sure." So I'm talking and I'm spending time with the customer, and I'm maybe talking to them on the phone. And there's certain customers where I have 30 emails back and forth because they have lots of questions, and I
Hmm.
certainly appreciate that. I'm glad to answer those questions, but all of that's unproductive time you have to calculate in too, huh?
Well, it's time you're working. And
Right.
over the years, I've had various organizations that have helped me, or MBAs, or business advisors that have come in to help me kind of get my head straight. Because, like I said,
Hmm.
for many years, I was operating poorly. Right? I
Right.
could easily just have had a 40-hour week job at an integrator, making more money than I'm making, and
Yeah,
not taking on the stress of being a business owner, and
totally.
not taking on all the stresses that come with it. And when they came in, they go, listen, when you're sitting, like when you sit down at that computer and you're doing work, like that's on the clock time. You should be
Yeah,
tracking that, and you
totally.
should, just a great exercise for any business owner out there, whether you're a calibrator or not, is track that time. I was
Hmm.
putting it on my calendar saying like office email time or just office time, and I
Hmm.
would clock in and clock out, and I would say, okay, today was 8 hours, or today was 4 hours, or
Hmm.
that Sunday 6 hours of billing, because I'll often do my billing on Sundays.
Hmm.
And so I would log that, and then I would look at the week and say, how many hours did I do this week, actual hours of work, and what were the billables for the week, and then what were the expenses for the week, using something like QuickBooks. And there's a lot of
Sure.
financial software out there you can sort of track your expenses with, and where everything is. And looking at it and going, wow. Some in the beginning it was really bad. I mean, like there were times I was making like $7 an hour, and I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
this week was like $7 an hour.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
that's before, by the way, that's before taxes, payroll
Oh,
taxes.
gee,
That's like what was coming to me.
we haven't even touched on that yet. The taxes. I
Yeah.
mean, you don't get your taxes are not out of your paycheck by default from your employer because
Mhm.
you are your employer. And I know a lot of folks out there, they'll do their taxes like I think quarterly because they don't want some massive bill at the end of the year. But
Mhm.
the last thing I'm interested in is sitting down and calculating my expenses and doing my taxes. So I'm very blessed because one of my best friends is an accountant. So we barter, she'll do my taxes and I'll take her
Mhm.
out to dinner, and but I'm very lucky in that aspect. Everybody else is probably paying somebody to do that. That's another expense that we haven't talked about yet either, is your taxes.
That's right. That's right. So because I'm a corporation, and if you become an LLC, you can do it various ways. But I do have a payroll processor. I do pay myself a
Hmm.
salary, and then because it's my business, I'll take a dividend, or profit from the company, which is a whole other thing. But you're paying yourself a salary, and then you're getting that payroll tax taken out of it, and then it's like, and then that's what your take home is. And so you also
Right.
have to have enough of a range to cover that as well. The beauty about being a business owner, though, is write-offs, right? You have a lot of write-offs, like, hey, I want that
Yeah.
new fancy light meter. I happen to run a business. I can expense that fancy light meter.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that makes it a little less stinging than if you were a hobbyist, right? Or someone
Hmm.
doing as a side hustle who might not have a business. It might raise some flags if you're expensing 10, 20, $30,000 of calibration equipment for a year, for some reason. So there are some perks, of course, having those write-offs and being able to take advantage of that. But at the same
Hmm.
time, you also have to deal with this other stuff. And just as you said, taxes, I hate it too. I think most people that are hustling and bustling in this business,
Yeah.
we're not the type of people who are like, well, let me sit down and do the numbers now and do my QuickBooks
Yeah.
balancing, and let me pay my
There's
quarterlies, and
yeah.
I have to get a Los Angeles City business license every year on top of
Hmm.
my. There's a fee to be a corporation in the state of California, so you have that in January, LA City business licensing in February every year, and every year I have to go through the forms and fill it out. I'm like, oh, I just don't want to do this anymore. It's
Yeah,
just, this isn't
it's
the fun part of business.
yeah. I mean, you're a lot like me in a sense that I like interacting with the customers and doing the work and playing with cool toys. So when it
That's
comes to all
right.
the paperwork and that kind of stuff, do you I know there's been times where you've had another employee, and that's got to throw a
Mhm.
whole nother layer of just shenanigans on the back
Yeah.
end, huh?
Yeah, employees are interesting. I was lucky that the gentleman that was working with me, who he was very, very amiable and very, I guess, aware of the situation that I don't know what I'm doing as an employer.
Yeah,
Right. So a lot of
yeah,
companies will
yeah.
have HR departments and they'll have
Right,
all
right.
these rules and like handbooks and all these guides. And I
Yeah.
paid a company to help me, an HR company that basically got me set up and did all the compliance stuff with him and with me and
Mhm.
said, okay, these are the compliance things. You have to do employee reviews. You have to do this. You have to do that.
Yeah.
And, there were things I probably weren't the best at because I'm not an HR person. I remember I was supposed to be reimbursing mileage. And for like the first 2 or 3 months, we weren't reimbursing mileage. Like I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
like, hey, submit me your mileage for the last 3 months and I'll just get it taken care of. But if you're at a big
Yeah.
company,
That's a
that's,
non-issue.
oh my gosh,
Yeah.
everyone's going to be screaming. And he's like, oh, cool, no problem.
Yeah.
I'll submit my mileage and you can just retroactively get me. And it was fine. So
Yeah.
he was very good with me learning, which was really
Yeah.
nice. But ultimately, it's not really what I want to be doing, right? I think
Yeah.
if you start hiring employees, if you can have someone that's HR, um, that's an HR person that knows the rules of your area, right? Every
Hmm.
state's different. Every county's got their own rules and regs and things
Sure.
like that.
And
It would be good.
let me guess, the HR company that you had to hire was they were free, right? Like they helped you out for free.
I think it was like 900 a month. And
Whoa.
I used them like 3 months to get me going,
Yeah.
and then it was, okay, I'll take it from here.
Yeah.
Because I didn't need the ongoing. It was more, I just need the onboarding and the let's get this set up. And then of course our
Hmm.
payroll processor got set up with them and we were doing payroll and
Yeah.
submitting timesheets and things like that. So
Hmm.
it adds another aspect. So if you're like me and you're a business, you're the business owner and the calibrator, and you want to be playing with the toys like you and I want to be playing with the toys and focusing more on the actual stuff we're good at. It just added a whole other level
Hmm.
to the business, right? All of a sudden I was an HR person. I was the person who had to deal with if they were calling in sick or if they needed vacation time or whatever. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, now I have to process that request. I need to rejigger the schedule. I need to
Hmm.
figure out how we're going to take care of everyone. And again, I was probably in the best situation ever because I had a really great employee who was very accommodating. He almost never called in sick, and when he wanted vacation time, he told me about it. So it wasn't
Yeah.
like he
Yeah.
was telling me, "Oh, you're not job. You have me scheduled tomorrow. I'm just taking the day off.
Yeah.
I'll see."
Nah, I'm good.
He didn't really pull that on me, so I
Yeah.
was very fortunate with that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it is another aspect for those who want to make calibration as a business to consider.
Sure, sure. Sammy has a question, and I'm so glad this is a great question by Sammy because you and I were just talking about this very recently, and it's kind of, to me at least, sort of a new idea. Um, I do get those folks sometimes where they do buy a $1,000, $1,500 TV, and then I quote them. Let's just keep an even number, a round number. I quote him $400 to do a few modes, and he lives a little bit of a ways away, so I got to calculate that all in. And the guy goes, $400, like no way, I can't do that. I only paid
Mm-hmm.
1,200 for the TV. And this to me is kind of a new problem, right? Like when Pioneer Elites were $7,000, a $300 calibration was a no-brainer. So I've started sort of rethinking this, and one of my mentors, Bob Fucci, who sort of started me down
Mm-hmm.
this path, but we all know that picking a better mode and setting white level and black level, color tint and sharpness, picking a good color temperature, making sure the sources are set up correctly, that's a lot of the battle. I would even argue that that's 75–80% of the battle. So my thoughts were, well, what if I do, like, we'll call it like a basic calibration, or just maybe like a TV optimization or video optimization. So I'll give you a good example, and this I think will answer Sammy's question. Sammy asks about different tiers and levels of service. So quick and dirty story. I had a gentleman that was downtown St. Pete. I live downtown St. Pete. He was in one of the big fancy condos. It was walking distance. So it was like a Saturday morning. He had originally called me because the integrator put in the system, but he wasn't quite happy with the picture and the sound. So he's like, can you come by and check it out? I took my generator with me and I took an SPL meter with me, and we just did the basics. It was in vivid mode, so we fixed that. The subwoofer wasn't hooked up in the back. It was there, but there was nothing plugged into it except for the power cable. The signal cable was laying on the floor next to the subwoofer for some reason. So I just, I spent maybe an hour, maybe an hour and a half at most. We got it into a better mode. He looked at a few test patterns with me. Oh, can you see box 17? Oh, now you can. Okay, great. Look at contrast, look at sharpness, look at a few grayscale patterns. And you know what? The guy was happy as a clam. I was there for, like I said, maybe 90 minutes, and I charged him like 150 bucks, and he was super happy. And I said, if you want to take this to the next level, I'll come back with my light meters. We'll do it in the evening because you've got all these windows everywhere. And then we will go to that next level, and we'll get to that maybe $400 to $500, whatever range. But Sammy, to answer your question, man, I don't think it's inappropriate or wrong at all to do different tiers and different levels. And I know, Dave, you probably, I don't know how you feel about that, because you are really concerned about accuracy with a lot of work in your studios. But any thoughts on doing different tiers?
So we did different tiers for a very long time. And I think this kind of comes back around to the how accurate is accurate conversation that we always keep coming around to. As you said, if you just come to the table and you say, hey, I'm an expert who knows what these controls are going to do and how to configure this to get us in the best starting point, right? As you said, if a TV's in vivid mode, odds are that isn't the right calibrated mode. So you might go to cinema, or you might go to ISF, or you might go to Technicolor mode or filmmaker mode, right? And just changing that mode got you better than out of the box. And making sure that subwoofer is plugged in, that's gonna, if it's not plugged in, it's not gonna work. So yeah, I know. But setting up the Blu-ray player, or the Ultra HD Blu-ray player now, or the Apple TV, the Roku, all the sources, making sure their outputs are correct, they're set up properly. I still walk into homes and the cable box or DirecTV box or Dish Network box will be set up for 480, and odds are it wasn't. Odds are, I don't think it's always set up that way when they leave. I think there are sometimes software updates or resets that happen. Maybe someone did a reset, but the customer didn't know to check it. So they didn't know to check it. You go in, you set it up for the right thing, and all of a sudden the picture's so much sharper. And so there is that. Even if you're not taking out a light meter, can I get the system better? Well, odds are a professional calibrator is going to be able to get that system better, even without taking out the light meter, doing software updates, checking these things, picking the right mode. And then in terms of my own business with tiered calibration, we were offering, when HDR just became a thing, we had an SDR tier, an HDR add-on, same thing with 3D. We had like a 2D tier and a 3D tier add-on, so it was an extra cost to do the 3D. And then we also had, as LUTs started becoming a thing, and all the companies that make LUT software today to calibrate displays, profile, compile, you create LUTs, they've all gotten a lot better over the last 5 to 10 years, right? The algorithms to create the LUTs have gotten better. And so in the beginning, we were doing like 21-point LUTs all the time, which, takes a long time to make over 9,000 measurements just to profile a display.
That's wild.
So back then we were finding, well, that's the best result. Well, that takes about 4 hours to do and validate. So let's have a fee where we called it the advanced LUT calibration tier. And so we do a basic without a LUT, an advanced with a LUT. And then as things have gotten better though, for myself, I've kind of gotten rid of a lot of the tiers. We were having a lot of trouble with clients, with the commercial clients, where the commercial clients call up and they go, hi, I've got 3 monitors I need calibrated. And you go, great, what are the make and models so I can tell you about our different options, right? We have the SDR, the HDR, the 3D, maybe it's a digital cinema projector. And they go, I don't know, man, I'm the assistant. I don't know, right? No so then what I was finding is I'm making them go do a lot more work to work with me.
Right,
That's
right.
not good from a business
Yeah.
standpoint. You don't want your customer to have to jump through hoops to work with you.
Hmm.
You want them to be seamless thing. Hey, I needed a solution. I called this guy. He got it done. That's how you want it to be. And
Sure.
so we got rid of the tiers now, and I'm more streamlined around a very standard model where it's like I don't care what the
Yeah.
make and model of the TV is. Here's the price to calibrate it,
Right, right.
and it's kind of an all inclusive thing today. And I
Sure.
get away with that because I can create. I will do the LUTs on pretty much all those monitors. Like if it's an LG OLED, I'm going to
Hmm.
calibrate it with a 3D LUT. I'm going to do it at that standard tier, but I don't have to have the extra add-on because I'm now doing it fast enough
It's
where
just,
I
yeah,
can get my
right.
time down. I got my
Hmm.
time down to a reasonable amount of time, which I've averaged out. So I think every caliber is a little different. It certainly is one way to do it. If in business, there's a very common thing of good, better, best, right? We see it with
Yeah,
cars, right?
sure.
The base model, the premium model, the luxury model. We see it
Hmm.
we see it with computers. We see it with so many things. Phones, right? The base
Yeah.
phone, the premium phone, the better phone. And so I don't think it's a bad idea to have a calibration business that is geared around. Maybe you have a base fee of this is what I come in and do, and I'm not going to pull out my light meter. I'm not going to do this, but I'm going to make sure everything's configured properly, set up properly. If you're
Yeah.
running the wrong cable, or oh, you're using
Yeah.
a composite cable, this should be HDMI.
Yeah. Right,
Then
right.
you come in and you help them there, and then maybe coming in and saying, well, you know what, I'm going to pull out the light meter, but I'm not going to spend 3 hours doing this. I'm going to spend an hour doing it,
Yeah.
and then maybe you have the 3 hour, 4 hour job where you're like, okay, now I'm fully going through this to get there.
Mike Osachu, he's our friend up in Toronto. He says that he had a ISF Express. It was kind of what he called,
Nice,
he
express.
called his, and
Love that.
I think he was saying that, maybe just a 2-point grayscale, maybe just, you're
Yep.
like you just said, you take out the meter, you do some basics, and
Mm-hmm.
that job I told you about before, where the guy had 7 modes.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing full 1D LUTs and 3D LUTs on every single one of those modes. So, that's why I
Mm-hmm.
was there for 5.5 hours. But
Mm-hmm.
if you do have these clients who are like kind of him and hawing about the price, I feel like you can start high and work your way down. That's just my sort of philosophy. It's like, okay, well, that we can, it's really all based off time, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the difference in time, here's what I'm dealing with right now. I started scheduling Sony's for 2 hours when most other TVs and most other systems I'm scheduling for 4. And why am I able to do that? Because of the software, because how well they dial in and stuff like that. So one thing that's come across the table is like, well, if it's taking you less time, should you be charging less money? And my answer to that is no. There's a reason you go to the 15-minute oil change place, right? You're paying them because it's fast and efficient and you can get in and out of there. But to make the job only 2 hours, that takes a lot of work.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've spent money on the fast meters. My knowledge and my experience, I know how to do it in
Mm-hmm.
only 2 hours. And in a lot of these residential environments, a lot of the folks, they don't want you there till 8 o'clock at night. They kind of want you in and out. Everyone's coming home from work and they're getting dinner ready and all this other stuff, or
Mm-hmm.
they're not at work because they have to meet you on a Wednesday morning or something like that. So I'm a big proponent of, if you can be more efficient and you can get in and out of there in less time, that's part of what they're paying for, if that makes any sense at all.
Oh, absolutely. I think that there's a reason why you pay a brain surgeon $10,000 an hour, because it took them 20 years to figure out how to do it, right? And so it's the same. I think obviously this isn't life and death, although a lot of customers might think
they
it's life and
they
death,
they
but
say
it's
it
not
is.
really life and death.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, especially when you're dealing with studios, it's like we have a
that's
screening on
different.
Friday. It's code red, and you're like, no one's gonna die if it's not calibrated by the screening on Friday, okay?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
but to step back from that, um, they're paying you for your expertise that you've
right.
learned over time to do it in 2 hours. So you're amortizing your education, right? Your
Mhm,
learning curve on that
mhm,
over the 50 sets you did, because maybe the first 5 sets took you 8 hours to do. And then you're like, oh, I can do this in 6. Oh, I
yeah,
can do this in
right,
4. Oh, I can do this in 2. And,
right.
and so now the 2 hour guy, customer, is now paying you that extra money that you were losing on that
Mhm.
8 hour person.
Yeah, yeah,
And
right, right.
it all amortizes out, all like evens out for
Yeah,
you across the
yeah,
board. So no, I don't think it should get less because you can do it faster.
Right.
If we start finding that we can do everything faster as an industry, right? If all calibrators can be out there and they're like, hey, all these TVs are, hit this button, press go, and walk away, and 2
Yeah.
hours later, every mode is calibrated. Well, then, yeah, we can talk about reducing our prices maybe.
Right.
But I'd argue that even if that's getting easier, what we're seeing is the cost of doing business is going up, right? My insurance has gone up, gas is going up, fees, the fees to get a business license have gone up here in LA,
Oh,
and
yeah.
so it's like all that stuff keeps increasing over time, and then with the cost of parts going up, we're going to see light meters go up, right? That Jetty
Yeah.
isn't going to be the same price. The Klein's not going to be the same price.
Mhm.
So now we're going to have to make a little more to cover that extra
Yeah.
difference. So you really got to look at the whole landscape, I think, of the whole ecosystem of running the business, of all the things you have to put money towards and how you have to do that before you can really make a price drop or a price increase.
Right.
To your point about, you were mentioning how a $1,200 TV, $400 calibration, we're fighting a losing battle there because the
I know.
TVs are being subsidized, just
Yeah.
like cell phones used to be.
Right.
I've worked with some manufacturers. I know you talked to some manufacturers, but I've been in rooms where I go, how can you possibly sell this for $999? And the guys
Yeah.
go, because that button on that remote from that app provider is paying millions of dollars a
Yeah.
year to have that button on that remote. And do you know that preloaded app from that other app provider? To preload that on the TV, they're paying millions of dollars a year. And so they go, we're now making so much from the sale, but so much is subsidized by these things that they're preloading or selling off
Yeah.
to other companies, which then allows them to be more competitive, right? The race to zero in the TV world.
Yeah.
But our complexity and difficulty keeps going up on how to calibrate them now.
Yeah.
And we're just, it feels like those metrics are just not going in the right direction.
Remember when you could get a cell phone for free as long as you signed your soul away to the company for 50 years? It's like you get the free phone, but we've got you locked in for a year or two. And to your point, that it was subsidized by the amount of people they were signing up. So I totally get you on that. There are a couple of questions. We'll go over those really quick. Cecil, he just came through ISF class. Good to see him here listening in or watching in. He's new and he's very hungry, and I know he's doing a lot of work to get his name out there. And he's mentioning, talking about the cost of gear and stuff like that. He's kind of taking it to the next level here. He's talking about taking a monitor out to, you mentioned the optical comparator, right? But he's talking about taking a reference monitor, perhaps, to some of the really high-end jobs just to do some visual comparison. So, those are other things to think about. Our little, not to give us a shameless plug here, but our little Murideo monitor, it's a little test monitor. It can be battery powered. It's got some analyzer functions built in, and I carry those with me because guess what happens to me sometimes? I show up to the job to calibrate the TV, and there's no HDR getting to the TV. So now I've turned this into a calibration, but also a troubleshooting job too. So having test monitors and stuff like that, that all has to be factored in. I mean, again, when I tell people my gear and they ask how much that stuff costs, and it's $25,000 plus, they're not counting that the stray light tube for the Jetty that you screw onto the end, that thing's like $600. So all these little peripherals and all these little adapters and all these cables and just all this stuff. I have a 20-meter fiber optic hybrid HDMI cable, so I can reach the projector that's way back there. That cable retails for like $800. So it's not always just the light meter and always just the generator and all that stuff. There's all these other things that you want to have in your kit. USB extensions, USB hubs, HDMI couplers, HDMI right angle adapters, just all this stuff. It all adds up.
We run a VPN. I travel with a virtual private network, a router and a cell modem that's all like enterprise grade. And it's because a lot of displays now require you to connect to them. And a lot of studios won't let you on the network. They either won't let you on the network, or if you're on the network, they block the traffic because a lot of displays are Internet of Things devices. They're weak points, so they just, we'll block all these ports. So we actually have our own VPN, which has a cost to it. And we pay monthly cell services to the providers to be on the network. And yeah, it all adds up. I mean, it really does. As you start to get up and up in those levels of service, you start to need more and more equipment for more and more things. If you're just doing TVs and consumer calibration and an HDMI generator, like the 6G is great. If you start going into studios, you need SDI generators, right? And then depending on what you're working on, it could be, there's so many variations. There's single link, 12 gig, quad link, dual link, you know, and so you have to have all these things that can do that to emulate the signal that the studios are using. And it just, again, the cost goes up, the gear goes up, and once you get it, once you have a nice kit, you're like, oh, I can walk into anything.
Yeah, dude. Yeah,
right?
there is. I will say there. Yeah, that kind of peace of mind and being able to have that confidence of, you know, I have everything I need. You know, I'm going to be able to go in here. I'm going to be able to kick this job's ass, and we're going to make the thing look good. And your level of confidence kind of goes up. And sort of to that point too. For those of you who might be new, or maybe you've done this for a little while, I would still check this out either way. But on the Murideo forums, so murideo.com, there's a tab at the top that says support. Click on that support tab, and there's what we have, the knowledge base. And I've been posting a lot of stuff in there over the years, tips on specific TVs and all these other things. But there's an article I wrote on, it's something along the lines of other things that a calibrator should consider. And it's this long list of all that stuff we just talked about, USB hubs and adapters and longer cables and this and that. The C6, for example, it doesn't have the longest cable in the world. And if you're, you know, working on a TV over a fireplace, you want a USB extension. But guess what? The C6 has LED lights on it. So sometimes like a real inexpensive generic, you know, passive USB extension is not good enough. So now you're looking at a powered USB hub, you know, and it just, all these things that are on this huge list that I made. So feel free, guys, check that out if you're curious. And I really built that list off of showing up to jobs and not having what I need and saying, oh crap, I need to get one of these things. And I just keep adding that stuff to the list. I think at this point it's a pretty good list. So guys, feel free to check that out. We're really close on time. If you guys do have any last minute questions, go ahead and type those in now. And while I'm waiting for some of those to come in, if they're going to come in, Dave, thank you. It always goes by so fast with you.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's always good talking to you.
Yeah, there's always a lot of fun topics, and we could do this stuff for hours. But if you guys do have any like additional questions, we are both like wide open on doing multiple sessions and talking about maybe even more specific topics. So, you know, for me, you know, I want to provide you guys with what you want. It's easy for me to come up with these ideas. Let's do this, let's do that. But if you guys want to see something specific or talk about a specific topic, send me an email, man, jason@murideo.com. Let me know your thoughts. I tweet a lot of this stuff out, you know, make comments or whatever. I want to do this for you guys. I want to help you guys. Somebody, Jose says, colorimetry research versus the Jetty fight. well, that's an offline thing, but no, it's all Jose. I mean, honestly, man, either one you go with, if you're looking at that level of light meters, either one you're going to go with, I think you'll be perfectly happy. I fought that back and forth myself, Dave. I even asked you for advice back then. I said, man, what should I get? Should I get this one or this one? And I ended up picking the Jetty, not for anything, you know, the colorimetry research. You know what I really like about that? Those things look cool. You know, they're black. Leak. They have that adapter. You can put both of them on the screen at once. It's a cool looking setup. Yeah.
That's it right there. So for me,
it's a cool setup.
You can look at spec sheets, right? You can look at spec sheets, and the CR300 that I use is not the best spectriometer ever invented, right? But I think it's one of the best units for portability for a calibrator who's running around. There are laboratory grade spectriometers out there from Minolta and Photo Research and various other companies that aren't quite as popular that have more sensitivity and whatnot, but they're large, they're liquid cooled, they're, you know, they take time to get up to temp, they have low signal to noise ratios, and they're very slow. And so I think the Jetty, the colorimetry research, some of the photo research, the Minoltas, I mean, there's so many of them out there that have products that reach our market that are very, very good. But what I love about the colorimetry research is two things. I live in Los Angeles, and they are based here in Southern California. So when I need to get them calibrated, maintenance, clean, whatever, I can drive them over, and I can be down for the most minimal amount of time. And as a business, if your moneymaker is that Jetty, right, or my photo research or a colorimetry research, whenever that's gone, you're down. And if you're down, you got to factor that time in to your rate, because now it's PTO, right? Or no PTO. Maybe it's paid time off. Maybe it's not paid time off if you're not amortizing that into your rate. And so one, they're here, which I love, and two, the dual meter mount.
It's
The
the
fact that I can put
coolest.
them both up on the same thing, profile them really quick. I can switch between them super fast.
That's awesome.
That is just so cool
Yeah,
that it makes me lean towards, and they have excellent customer service, but I know a lot of
yeah,
companies in this world have excellent customer service. So,
yeah. Well,
but
and
that,
to your
that
to
really
your
helps me.
to your point, man, it's not always about the specs. I mean, I totally agree with you here. Sammy just typed into the question box or the comment box. Don't forget on the Calibration Research, you have a detachable USB cable. That's awesome. The Jetty is Bluetooth. That's
Mhm.
fantastic. So when you're shopping
Mhm.
for these light meters, don't just go off specs. Look at all the other things that might help you. I mean, the Jetty, I just did a Sony 5000 ES last week. Because of the way the room is situated, I had to put the Jetty pretty far from the computer, but it didn't matter because it was Bluetooth, and that's
Mhm.
one less cable to trip over and stuff like that. So, look at
Mhm.
also not just the specs, but look at the features that'll help you in your calibration life, if you will. But
Exactly.
yeah, and guys, that looks like that's the last question. Thank you so much for hanging out. I hope this was very helpful to you. This was something that I sort of I scheduled this and talked to Dave about it sort of on accident because I had a few questions myself, and I think Dave, you said this at the beginning, but it was like, man, this is a good topic to just talk about. So here we are, guys. If you do have any more specific questions, it's jason@murideo.com. If you have any specific questions for Dave, just send me those questions and I'll filter them out to Dave. But thank you guys so much for hanging out. Don't forget, leave some comments. Let me know. Shoot me an email. Let me know the things that you want to do and you want to learn, and maybe some of the guests you might want me to have on. I'm totally all ears for that type of stuff. So thank you, Dave, so much.
Thank you.
All right, cool. We'll see you next time.